Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Hello and welcome to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson. I'm going to be talking about truth and freedom. And this would be your truth and your freedom. A couple of episodes ago, at least I believe it was that long ago, I was referring to a story about someone who had received a letter out of the blue. It was from an old acquaintance. And while there wasn't really a romantic relationship going, the potential was there. And this love interest or acquaintance, I would say, sort of just dropped out of sight, became somebody that was missing in action. And when things happen that way, obviously someone has to deal with, okay, what happened? And that can bring up the abandonment feelings, and that really can dig down deep into some old hurts. So processing that can be quite a task. So you're going on, you're living your life, and then all of a sudden you get some communication. You get a letter, in this particular case, that shows up, and it sort of outlines the circumstances surrounding the missing in action person, explaining that they were going through some things in life, and most likely it's detailed a relationship of some sorts. But when these things show up, if you have been the person who has had to process that episode, let's say you're the person who was interested, and now you've received this letter, and it sort of details the time. You ask yourself, okay, do I want to respond to this? What has happened to me in this process? If you have put away that hurt, that pain, all of those things that came up for you, then you have to ask yourself, okay, do I want to revisit this? What's this going to do to my peace? Aside from whatever you may read in the letter. I mean, you may read things that say, hey, please call me, whatever the contents of that communication could be. But you have to think about what you want in these situations. And I invite individuals to take the time that they need, because this person could be sending you a letter and it could have gone, weeks, months, whatever the time period. And there is no sense of urgency on your part to have to contact this individual. Unless you absolutely see something, maybe they're going to die, then yeah, you might speed up the timeline here. But in the interest of really thinking about what's going to happen to you when you get into communication with this person, because there's a lot of scenarios. If there were some romantic feelings involved, stirring this stuff up could open up some old wounds that are better left where they were. And if opening this thing up, it might be a joyous occasion for you, then yeah, okay, you might just say, okay, go on ahead and start in. But one of the things that I encourage people to do, especially when they're trying to sort this stuff out, is to take pen to paper. I like the journaling part, and I do it the old-fashioned way. I do a lot of writing, and you can dictate things into devices nowadays, so that could help speed up the process. But what this does is it helps clear the mind. I mean, whatever I'm thinking, I just start writing it down, and specifically about this subject. And I find myself a quiet place so that I can do this, because anything that's going to come up related to this, I want to be able to put it on paper. Because for me, and I'm going to relate to it from that experience, for me, when I have this kind of situation where there's a lot to consider, it is really hard to just keep it up in my head. So by writing it down, I have literally found myself able to sleep a lot better. Now, people who write journals, do diaries, you can probably relate to this really well. If this isn't an experience that you do a lot anymore, maybe you did it at one time, maybe you were a college kid, you were just so tired of writing because it all seemed like homework. But this is more of a personal nature, and this really helps chronicle your life. And I think as you do this, you can begin to put things into perspective. And it's the rereading of this, whatever you've journaled, can help you focus in on where some of the trouble spots are. But back to the point of writing just to clear your head, because you can have a whole lot of feelings. I mean, and there's the ambivalence of yes, no. There could be the strong feelings of why you really dislike this person now for even showing up in your life. Put that down on paper. Get it all out there. And this is just for you to read. This isn't something that you have to share with somebody else. This is just for you. This is like your diary. You can lock it away, put it in a strong box, put it in a safe so nobody else can see it. But I think it's really critical that you express yourself and whatever it is you're feeling. I mean, there's nothing that's too selfish here. You really put it down so that you can see it. Almost as if, you are being a friend and listening to that other person tell you everything that they're feeling. So you get to play both parts here. You write it exactly as you feel it, and you don't have to justify anything. And I think that's one of the things that happens to people is when you start explaining, let's say if you were telling the story to someone else. This is why I suggest you journal it for yourself, because if you're telling the story to someone else, you might feel like you have to justify what it is you are going through. And you don't. I don't want you to feel like you have to justify any of this, because where we are at in your head is helping you learn how to heal from whatever things that have happened. Because if this was a situation that was dropped on you, let's say you were in communication with somebody and all of a sudden they just sort of disappear without a word as to what's going on, or maybe you did know something about why, and they decided to fall in love with somebody else and not you. Well, hey, that hurts, especially if you were invested in this and now you're left with having to figure out what to do with your feelings and that whole business. So it's very involved, and that's why there is so much that's going to be stirred up when a letter like this shows up for you. So as you're reading it and you're reading the details, you might read and there could be some things in there that are really going to get you stirred up, and some things may make you sad. There might be some things in it that make you happy, but all told, you read it. And when it comes to how you're going to respond, like I said, I want you to do some journaling and take the time to be there for yourself. Be a friend to yourself first, because that's what you're responsible for. And while you're in this process, think about what this is taking out on you at the moment. Think of the toll that you're paying right now just because this thing showed up. Now, if this letter or this communication, however it is, it could be letter, it could be email, it could be text message. If this had never showed up, what would you be doing today? How would you be feeling? Would you feel better, or would you not feel as good? I mean, did it make you feel good when this thing showed up? Again, there's all of these possibilities, but think about where you would be. And if this is a distraction to you, well, you really should be pumping your brakes. And I wouldn't necessarily jump into trying to reconnect with this person until you have figured out what it is you want. Because invariably, there's going to be conversation. And if that is, if you decide to communicate with them, there's going to be some conversation. There's probably going to be a bit of a catch up. You're probably going to have questions. And, all of those kind of things are going to be on the table for you. Because remember, you were the one who were sort of left holding the bag, left trying to figure out what to do with your feelings now that this situation has gone the direction that it has. So I'm going to take a break. I'm going to come back, and we're going to take this apart some more.
GSMC Beauty Tips Podcast gives you advice on everything from hair to fashion to skincare products. We'll talk about the latest trends in makeup, hairstyles, and anti-aging remedies. And we'll cover all of the newest fashion trends. If you have an interest in or questions about the beauty trends that might work best for you, the Golden State Media Concepts Beauty Tips Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Beauty Tips Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
See more of the USA than ever before with American Airlines. Fly direct to Dallas-Fort Worth from Dublin Airport this summer and connect onwards to over 240 destinations across North America. Enjoy complimentary meals, drinks from the bar, transatlantic Wi-Fi, live TV, and over 1,000 hours of entertainment on board our state-of-the-art Dreamliner. Start your next big adventure with American Airlines at AA.com.
Hello, and we're back. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson, and we're talking about truth and freedom. That is your truth and your freedom. The scenario here is you've been reconnected in some way, shape, or form because there's a communication that's shown up from somebody that you had been involved with to some degree, and you got left. So you were abandoned, and there is a whole host of things that come up for people who have been abandoned, and then this mystery person, or not, maybe not mystery to you, but this person just reappears, and you're wondering what to do in this situation. And the reason I call it truth and freedom is because you have to be true to yourself about how you feel, because therein lies where your freedom is going to be. Sometimes we don't really know how we feel because we have been so programmed to be there for other people, to be in response to other people's emotions, and we might feel selfish taking our own needs into consideration. Now, there are a lot of us that are out there that do that very thing, especially those of us that like to be in the helping profession. We're in the business of trying to make other people feel good, and sometimes, that's how you're raised. You're raised that other people's feelings matter. I mean, a lot of people, this isn't the case, but for those that would be struggling with this is why I'm having this podcast. You're going to be wanting to think about what's that other person going through. And that's very good that you want to be considerate of someone else. But now I'm trying to help you make yourself the priority. Because when something like this shows up, and remember the circumstance here, the circumstance was you pretty much got left, meaning you were pretty much abandoned by this person, and now you have this communication that shows up that sort of explains with some, maybe it's sort of vague, but some of the details of this time frame that's elapsed. And you might be a little misty-eyed, and you might want to reconnect and just sort of put the pieces back together. But that ship may have sailed. And there is that in our mind, that romantic notion that we can turn the clock back, pick up where we left off and move on to greener pastures. And I'm not suggesting that that can't happen, but before we go there, we really want to think about this, what this period of time has done to you, to us, to figure out this. I've said do the journaling, and what are your feelings that come up around this whole thing? Because I think a lot of us have experienced the abandonment thing. And when somebody just sort of disappears or says, okay, I want to be with somebody else and not you, well, that hurts. And you now have all of your feelings that you have to figure out what to do with this time. That other person is gone. So you're not beholden to them to have to respond to this letter in any way, shape, or form. Or the communication, and I'm going to use it and try to use it in a generic way like that. You're not beholden to them to have to respond. And because of that, you can decide to do nothing. You can take the letter, you can burn it, you can throw it away. Some people like to burn things because that's very ceremonious to them. Burning destroys it. It's gone. You may pick it up, read it several times, and try to get an interpretation of what it means. And, you might run the risk of reading things into this letter that are not intended. So that's why I say you have to be really careful about where you're going to go with this. And before you get your heart involved, you have to be in the place of taking care of yourself. And this is where the journaling comes in, because you're going to write things down and I want you to read them. You don't have to erase, because that's not what this is about. You're not about erasing things. You're just writing down. You're free thinking. Really getting to the core of your emotions, get the anger out if that's what's coming up for you. Get those love feelings out if that's what's coming up for you. Get all of this out and be with it. I like it on paper so that it doesn't stay in your head if you're trying to sleep. Because if you're trying to sleep, I'm the kind of person that I can't sleep when my head is full of this kind of stuff. I have to get it out. And I find once it's out there, I can feel a little more relaxed, and I'm not going to be leaning one way or the other. I'm just going to be ambivalent. It's both sides are going to be out there. And I don't necessarily have to be in conversation with someone else about this. I'm being a friend to myself so that I can take my interests and put them first. And it's not about somebody else. It's about me. I can be selfish during this time. And I'm telling you, you can be selfish during this time because you have to take care of you. Remember, this thing just showed up. So now that you've started to write these things down, if you've made the decision, the choice, let me say that. If you've made the choice to say, I'm not going to go anywhere with this. I'm just writing my feelings out. I've already had enough hurt associated with this, you can drop it. You can be done with it. Like I said, you can burn that letter, you can destroy it, you can do whatever you want to do. Boom, it's gone. And why would that be a choice for you? I can tell you why. If your life has moved on, let's say you have somebody that you are involved with, then I think your loyalty would be more to that situation rather than somebody just walking back into your life trying to reconnect. And you don't owe that person anything. Really, you don't. Remember, the person who's in your life now, who's committed time and effort to you, that's the one you want to be loyal to because they have probably been there in your hour of need. And that situation that you left probably helped you grow some so that you could be in the place that you're in so you can take care of yourself a lot better. I know how these old relationships or circumstances kind of introduce themselves to you. And sometimes it's where those situations happen. It's an opportunity to test you to see how far you have come. Do you get drawn back into those things? Is that your temptation? Because if it is, you're going to relearn that lesson all over again. And having migrated from those situations really should be part of your journey, your life's journey, to say that you have graduated from those old things and you're moving on. Remember, this is a good thing. But back to the point about if you have somebody in your life now, there is no reason that you would likely want to leave them for this situation that just shows up. Because that's a lot of work. Because think about the drama. You'd be undoing the situation you're in and then trying to pick up where you left off with the situation that's prior to that. A lot of drama. You don't want that. You don't want that. But if you are single and these things are more of a possibility, then maybe this is something you might want to visit. The possibility. But that's all about why we are writing and thinking about what might be the consequences. Remember, we have grown since that whole thing was dropped in our lap to have to recognize and deal with. I'm going to pause. I'm going to come back and dissect this some more.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now. Don't bother. What's hot on Netflix and everything in between. That's GSMCpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Travel Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
See more of the USA than ever before with American Airlines. Fly direct to Dallas-Fort Worth from Dublin Airport this summer and connect onwards to over 240 destinations across North America. Enjoy complimentary meals, drinks from the bar, transatlantic Wi-Fi, live TV, and over 1,000 hours of entertainment on board our state-of-the-art Dreamliner. Start your next big adventure with American Airlines at AA.com.
Hello, and we're back. This is John Johnson, the Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. We're talking about your truth and freedom. Now, that last segment, I was talking about the setup and all the circumstances that you're facing in this situation and the decision to not want to re-invite the drama that could come up because of this person decides to maybe introduce themselves back into your life. And I'm not just talking about somebody who just is just giving you the story, just explaining something about the absence. Because, you can read that letter and be gone with that. But this is somebody that's really trying to reintroduce themselves into your life and in a more significant way. So if that situation comes about and you are already happily in a situation, in a relationship with somebody, then you don't want to break what you have just to pick up with something out of the past, because that's more of a romantic notion. And like I said, you have had to learn how to deal with that. And that's what helps grow you up. Now, here's a scenario. If you are not currently involved with somebody and this letter arrives and you want to think about the possibility, then this appears, because I like to give both sides of this. So now we have the opportunity to consider, okay, where does this benefit you? Why would you want to consider this? And it's really seductive to want to think about what may have been. And now you kind of have the idea that maybe I get a second chance at this. Well, like I said, that's very seductive. The mind really likes to play with things like that. But if you decide, or if you choose that you want to go this route, remember some things here. Think about what you want and how you want that to look. Because you're going to have to be very, very specific. Because as this person comes back into your life, and I know there's going to be a lot of feel-good stuff. You're going to have these romantic things that are going to come up, and you're going to really, really want this. Because this gives you a chance to revisit something that was important to you. You're going to have to lay down some specific terms. Because if you don't, then this thing is just going to meander, and it may work out, but how are you going to know if it is really working if you have not set out on a specific direction with this and really talked about some things that are important to you? You're going to have to really be in the communication part about your own feelings. Because if you weren't good at that before, then you need to be good at this. You need to be able to represent yourself. And by that, you're going to want to ask what happened. I mean, not just because you saw it in the letter, that's a good starting point, but you want details. Because what you have seen is an example that somebody can abandon you. And we all know what that feels like. That's very hurtful. You don't want to keep revisiting that. Because if this person that you are interested in has the capacity to do that, they could do it again. You got to wonder what brought them back into your life. Now, were they just feeling that they needed to confess something? Because if that's all it is, then there might not be much different going on. But that's where when you ask the critical thinking questions about why they're coming back, what happened, what do they expect to have happen in the future, what do they want from you, those are all very good questions. And you want to ask those questions yourself. What are they bringing to the table? Why do they want you? And why would you want them? Think about it, if the situation was good before, at least you were giving of yourself, then, I mean, how much more could you do that's going to make the situation better? Or did they have such a lousy thing that happened to them in the past and they did the comparison and realized, wow, you were the better person? Now, man or woman, it doesn't matter. But in the case of realizing your own worth, you want to know what the value is. What is it to you? What are you to them? You want to know those answers. You at least need to be on that, trying to figure this part out. Because if not, then where you go is you're going to revisit the past. And this is an example. This is a really good possibility is where the past becomes the future. Because if you have habits that, for example, remember I was talking about how you're very nurturing, you're very giving, you're very caring, and that gets activated. I don't think you should change those things about yourself. But I think what you want to do is you want to add, get the word add, you want to add some wisdom. You want to add some things like self-love. That's an important one. You got to show that because people will treat you the way you let them treat you. So if you let people treat you poorly, they're going to do it just by default because you don't make yourself important enough to say, wait a minute, no to that. And you don't have to say yes to everything. I mean, nobody's going to say no to everything. That makes you just grumpy. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about being very discriminating. And even the people that you love, it's really hard to tell people that you love to tell them no. But sometimes they need that. And not just out of spite, but establishing boundaries. And this is a real important thing for people who love to give, because they're just wired that way. It's establishing boundaries. And especially when it comes to relationships. You want to be able to give freely. You want the people who you love to really get it, that you're doing it because you love them. And you also don't want to feel like you're being stepped on, that all you're doing is just giving, and not receiving anything. That is a real difficult situation to be in. But caretakers find themselves in those situations a lot. I mean, they're looking for appreciation, and that's great. But you got to establish some boundaries so that you can get some feel good and get some strokes so that you can continue to give. But part of that also happens when you take care of yourself. And this is one of the ways in which you do this, by thinking about what it is you want, what it is you need, and then asking for it and expecting that. I mean, if they love you, then they're going to want to give it to you. And it might require some negotiation. And here's another thing. When you're doing this kind of thing, it might even be, especially with a person who has been in your past, it may be a bit different for you to express this part of yourself, and it kind of like changes the rules. And remember, you're a different person now. But if they see this as they're wanting to come back to the old you, then it's probably not going to work. They're going to have to accept that there is a new you, that there's new rules, and it's going to work for both of us. It might be a little difficult for you at first, especially to someone that you were pining over, but you're going to have to learn to do that to protect your heart. And remember, that's good for the soul. Hey, my time is up. I've been talking about truth and freedom and not letting your heart get hurt again the way it was before. I'm John Johnson. I hope this has given you something constructive to think about.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.